Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, we're going to be talking about this fantastic category of baits that we call hollow body frogs. Hollow body frogs are one of the most exciting bass lures on the market. I've had so much success over the years throwing a frog in so many different situations. And because I've spent so much time fishing this type of bait, I've made a lot of mistakes myself, and I see a lot of people making the same mistakes. So I wanted to do this video and let's talk about the 5 different mistakes that people make while fishing a hollow body frog. Let's get to it. All right, so the first mistake that I see people make, and it's generally a mistake that people make when they first start out throwing a frog, is that you assume that a frog is only supposed to imitate other frogs. You know, we all know that matching the hatch in bass fishing, matching your presentation to the forage species that the bass see quite often and they feed on is an important thing. However, bass are also very opportunistic. They are the type of fish that they eat anything that pretty much can fit in their mouths. It could be turtles, it could be rats, squirrels, ducks, it could be anything. You know, it's crazy what fish will eat or what bass will eat. And with a frog, yeah, manufacturers go to great lengths to make sure that their frogs look like frogs. But to me, that's more to catch the consumer than to catch the bass, because the reason why this is a big mistake is because a lot of people will just throw a frog where there's frogs around. You know, maybe they see a lot of frogs on the bank, and so they assume that they have to throw the frog because there's frogs around. However, that means that a lot of people are overlooking scenarios where there's no frogs at all, you know, where maybe, you know, it's a bluegill or shad or a wide variety of things, you know, things that don't even live in the water that the bass don't see very often, like mice, baby squirrels, ducklings, things like that. A frog can imitate a wide variety of different things, so don't pigeonhole yourself to throwing a frog only when you think there's frogs around that the bass are feeding on. Frogs are a great way to imitate a wide variety of things that are on the surface that are trying to get away. So that is the first mistake. So mistake number 2 that I see people make when they're fishing a frog is they think that it's only about fishing around vegetation. You know, a frog is one of the best lures of all time to fish over matted grass, you know, whether that's, you know, right here we've got some deer tongue or pepper grass. Lily pads are a great example. Matted out hydrilla, milfoil. People assume that frogs are just made for vegetation, and it's true. That is probably the best overall scenario for catching fish on a frog. However, a frog is so much more than just a grass lure. I love fishing a frog around any type of isolated structure. I like skipping it underneath docks. I love skipping it underneath overhangs. I fish it in open water. There's so many things that you can do with a frog. So one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they only pick it up when there's grass around. Really broaden your horizons. A frog is super versatile. All right, guys, so the third mistake is probably the most important one to pay attention to. You know, a hollow body frog is very unique in that it has some of the heaviest duty hooks that you'll find with any category of bait. In fact, it's probably the most heavy duty hooks that you can possibly find. Some of them are just downright ridiculous. So you could catch a shark with the hooks that they put in some of these frogs. But because the hooks are such a heavy diameter, you need to use tackle that really works well for setting the hook hard and also wrenching fish out of cover. So one of the biggest things is always using braided line. I rarely speak in definitives on this channel, but when it comes to frog fishing, I don't know of any really good argument on a reason why to fish monofilament or fluorocarbon. Braid has literally no stretch or you know, barely any stretch. None that you can notice anyways. It comes through cover really well, and it also is very strong per line diameter. And I really recommend, you know, even 30-pound braid a lot of times is insufficient for setting the hook, because those hooks are so darn thick. And to get them through those fish's mouths, you need about 40 to 65 pound braid. You know, I would say 40 is still really pushing it in a lot of occasions. You know, I break off a lot of fish on 30 and 40 pound test braid, you know, if I'm fishing around even light vegetation, you know. So it's really important to use heavier braid. 50 pound if you're fishing around open water, skipping in underneath stuff, you know, sparse vegetation, things like that. And then 65 pound braid if you're fishing over real thick vegetation. Okay, so don't go light when it comes to your line, and always use braid. It's really has the qualities that's going to allow you to be more efficient and effective with a frog. The next thing that's really important is your rod. Okay, I use two different rods for the situations that I face when throwing a frog. When I'm fishing open water, I really like to use a 7.3 heavy action all-purpose series rod. And all this stuff is going to be in the description below. But if I'm fishing like heavy vegetation, that's when I go to a 7.6 Okeechobee rod. That's the actual name of the rod. It's a 7.6 heavy action rod. It's kind of like a flipping stick, but that has plenty of backbone and it has a lot of leverage. So it's super important to use a heavy action rod for frog fishing. You probably get away with a medium heavy. I know I have, but there's going to be some of those situations where, you know, the fish grabs the bait in some cover, pulls it under, and when you go to set the hook, a lot of that bend is ate up just kind of catching up with that fish. So in my book, it's all about heavy action rods. You just got to find the ones that are kind of fit the situation that you're fishing and allow you to get the right action of the bait. So those rods that I told you are my favorite, but you know, there's a lot of great rods on the market for frog fishing. All right, so the fourth mistake that I see people make is that they don't walk the dog with a frog. A lot of people just tend to want to, you know, push this frog forward or pull it forward like it's hopping. And again, that's a mistake of, you know, trying to imitate a frog. You don't necessarily need to imitate a frog to catch fish on a frog. One of my favorite ways to fish a frog is to walk the dog. You know, that side to side action where you're not pulling it forward a lot as much as you are walking it side to side. That walk the dog action is just a proven fish triggering motion that really looks like a you know, any type of animal that is trying to get away, that is struggling to get out of the water or is injured. So walking the dog is really important, and if you're not walking the dog in open water, you're making a big mistake. Now, when you're fishing heavy vegetation, you know, heavy grass mats, you're doing more of a pulling motion. You know, you're either dragging it and stopping, or you're doing like little short forward, you know, pops of the rod tip. So you're not really walking the dog when you're fishing matted grass, but anything where there's plenty of open water around the frog, like skipping under docks, under overhangs, around a cover, but not quite in it, walking the dog is the deal, and that is one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make. All right, now for number 5. One of the hardest things to deal with as anglers nowadays is just dealing with the amount of tackle that's available. I mean, there's so many different types of baits, and then you've got an endless amount of SKUs of different colors and all that different stuff. So that's no different with frogs, man. You can go down the aisle and there's some frog companies that just make, you know, it seems like 100 different colors of frogs. But in reality, if you're really just trying to get out and you know, learn how to fish a frog, or you don't know what color to choose, I've got your back. All you have to do is pick up a black frog or a white frog. These two colors, black and white, or black and white, these two colors, black and white, are the two key colors that you need to have in your tackle box for frog fishing. I'm not saying you shouldn't have other colors, but in general, one of these two colors is going to get bit, you know, especially black. Black is one of my absolute favorite frog colors. It imitates just about anything. It could be a blackbird. Again, it could be like some kind of rodent. There's all kinds of different things that a black frog can imitate. And you know, especially when I'm fishing matted grass, black is such a good color. And then white is also a really good color. It imitates a variety of different bait fish. Again, it could imitate a bird, but in general, these two colors, these two major shades, both sides of the spectrum cover a lot of different situations. So don't get, you know, bogged down in like color selection. If you really are looking for two colors that are going to allow you to cover a lot of different situations, it's these two right here. So anyways, guys, you know, just to close this thing out, the biggest part about frog fishing, the biggest mistake that a lot of people make is they overthink it. Just go out there, go experiment with fishing a frog. It's one of the most versatile topwater lures that you'll ever tie on. Let me know in the description below or the comment section below if you have any questions or if there's a mistake that I missed in this video. I want to hear your perspective on that. Otherwise, I got all the links in the description below, the tackle that I did talk about. And yeah, other than that, go have fun with a frog. I'm going to see you out on the water. Make sure you always trust the process.